How's it going, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about everything that you need to know before watching COD Champs 2022. In this video we'll be talking on every team's journey so far throughout the season, all of the best storylines going into the event, and more. If you've not done so already, make sure to leave a like on the video and hit subscribe on the channel for more. This year's Champs takes place on August 4th through the 7th at the Galen Center live in Los Angeles. This is the 10th Call of Duty World Championships that we've ever had, going back to the first one that took place in 2013. The only two players who can say that they've managed to play in every single COD Champs up to this point is Scump from Optic Texas and Crim6 from the New York Subliners. This season, we've had a total of 6 LAN events, with 4 of those being majors and the 2 others being events that help highlight the start of the year as well as the challenger scene. The most interesting part about these 6 LAN events that we've had is that each one of them has had a different victor. Toronto Ultra started off the year with a kickoff classic W, Optic Texas won Major 1, the LA Guerrillas won Major 2, the New York Subliners managed to win the Pro-Am, the Seattle Surge took the victory at Major 3, and most recently, the LA Thieves are off of a W at Major 4. Now, throughout the season, all 12 of our CDL teams have been competing for points. Those points total into our top 8, the only teams that will in fact be going to Champs. The bottom 4 rosters who will not be at Champs this season are the Paris Legion, the LA Guerrillas, the Minnesota Rocker, and the Florida Mutineers. Alrighty, now with that out of the way, let's go ahead and chat about all of the 8 teams that are attending Champs and how they've managed to get to this very point. Starting things off with the number 1 seed, it's the Atlanta FaZe. Atlanta FaZe were one of only 3 teams that decided to keep their same roster from Cold War into Vanguard. Needless to say, there was a reason for that. Not only did they win the World Championship last season, but they put on one of the most dominant seasons we've seen in Call of Duty esports history. Atlanta FaZe racked up a grand total of 3 major championships along with the World Championship at the end of the season. They also won over 80% of their total series and racked up a grand total of 525 points, with the next 2 seeds barely even reaching over 400. We came into Vanguard with the highest of expectations. Their 2019 season was a warm-up. Cold War was their come-out party, and we expected this year to be a continuation of that. But so far, it hasn't ended up that way. This season was supposed to solidify the Atlanta FaZe dynasty, a word that we use very carefully in Call of Duty, as only 2 other teams have managed to achieve that status. The worst part about Atlanta FaZe is not that they've plummeted this season, but that they've come so close to winning without achieving a title. Atlanta FaZe finished in 2nd place at Major 1, Major 2, and Major 3, falling to rivals Optic Texas in front of their home crowd, stunned by one of the greatest Cinderella stories, the LA Guerrillas at the Minnesota Major, and lost to longtime foe the Seattle Surge in dramatic fashion twice at the Toronto Major. As we mentioned earlier, 6 teams have won on LAN this season. That is half the league, and somehow Atlanta FaZe are not on that list. With FaZe having a career year out of Cellium, but an underachieving season for the other 3 standards, the constant 2nd place finishes, the overwhelming amount of comments that they've received about not living up to the community standards, the overrated chance, etc., the World Championship would make all of that hardship, everything that they've gone through, worth it, on top of putting these 4 players at the very top of Call of Duty history. If Atlanta FaZe managed to win the World Championship this year, Simp, aBeZy, and Arcitys would tie Crim6 and Clayster for the most World Championships ever at 3. Simp, aBeZy, and Arcitys would be considered the greatest trio ever, winning 3 rings in the last 4 years, all being together. Simp and aBeZy would undoubtedly become the greatest duo ever. 3 World Championships together, 4 straight COD Champs Grand Finals, as well as back-to-back rings. Not only would this achievement skyrocket them to the elite of the elite, but also the speed at which they've accomplished this would go down as downright legendary. It would put those 2nd place finishes in a much better light and finally return the Titans of the league back to their rightful place on top of the CDL. Next up is the number 2 seed, Optic Texas. Without a doubt, the team with the biggest spotlight on them coming into Vanguard this year was Optic Texas. After a flurry of organizational changes, Chicago Huntsman in year 1, Optic Chicago in year 2, and now Optic Texas in year 3, This season felt like the first year where all the juggling and constant brand adjustments were coming to an end. After in the offseason, the two most legendary and historic esports brands, Optic and Envy, decided to merge. A decade plus of history and rivalry now formed as a franchise superpower, not only out of the game, but also in-game. Scump and Dashy would combine with Shotzzy and Illy to form what looked like one of the best teams coming into the year. And that talent clicked almost instantly as Optic Texas claimed their Major 1 championship in front of their home crowd over CDL rival Atlanta FaZe. It looked like Optic was poised for one of the best seasons that they've seen in years until the injury. Heading into a mid-season Pro-Am event, Illy was labeled as questionable due to a hand injury. Something assumed that would only take a few weeks, didn't end up clearing until midway through Major 4, a whole 2 months later, and a major bulk of the season gone. Illy made his comeback hoping to bring back life to an Optic trio that had been working with replacements and ever-changing injury updates. After an impressive lower bracket run and top 4 finish at Major 4, Optic Texas are still looking to catch up on all the lost time that they had in the middle of the season, as well as get back to the dominance that they displayed at the start of the title, while also trying to deliver a world championship to the biggest fan base in the entire game, despite the constant hurdles and the inaugural year of the merger between Optic and Envy. If they were able to accomplish this feat, it would mark the second world championship for Scump, Illy, and Shotzzy, while also marking Illy and Shotzi's second world title together, instantly elevating them to one of the greatest duos in COD esports history. Despite a lot of slander on Dashy's name, he would walk away with his first ever ring, and as we said, the king of Call of Duty would be given his second champs ring, establishing his already historic career even further. This championship would help showcase the incredible longevity of Scump's career, as well as put him into a much more stable light in the GOAT conversation. The only slight against Scump's career is his lack of world titles when we talk about the best of the best. Winning his second, given the craziness of this year as well as the mid-season injury for Illy, would go down as one of the most impressive wins ever on the inaugural year of the Optic and Envy merger. Next up, the number 3 seed, the Los Angeles Thieves. The LA Thieves, owned by 100 Thieves and COD legend Nadeshot, have been the most criticized roster this year. The LA Thieves entered franchising last season in Cold War with high hopes and championship contending expectations. Needless to say, it wasn't that type of year at all. After constant roster changes and major roster updates every few weeks, the LA Thieves came into Vanguard looking to rewrite the script, now with the powerhouse lineup, bringing in Envoy of Optic Chicago and 100 Thieves legend Octane, previously on the Seattle Surge. Those two alongside Kenny and Draza on paper look like one of the best teams in the league, but did look quite a bit different on paper to a lot of other teams. Lacking a designated second SMG, the Thieves grinded out the season trying players in and out of the role, but continued to falter early in the standings. Kenny, the best SMG in the 2017-18 season, who's also been known to resist the role in the past few years despite community backlash, was forced into the role after LA Thieves started to reach a breaking point. Kenny switching to the role wasn't a return to glory by any means. Falling lower and lower in the statistics rankings, his teammates were seeing success, and only on maps where Kenny could run the AR did he really start to show up. That is, until Major 4. Working heavy to try and improve as well as remove the stigma of a very hot and at times cold team, the Thieves worked as well as they could to try to become the most well-rounded heading into Major 4. They were also in danger of missing out on champs, but managed to turn their game to a new level at the most recent Major in New York. Not only were they winning series, but they were taking down top caliber rosters along the way. And on top of all of it, the man who's received more flack than anybody, called to be dropped the whole season because of his recent few-year funk and switching to the SMG role, found that very same form that he did in his rookie season, had a career-defining event, and became champion on top of winning the MVP. The LA Thieves we'd hoped we'd see all season long has finally arrived, and at the perfect time possible, with Kenny looking his best now on the SMG role and the rest of the roster following suit. On top of being their most well-rounded, the nightmare has finally started to end for the Thieves franchise and could be topped off with a world championship. After 2 very difficult years of being on the most underwhelming franchise, after being released by Optic, after being called their future superstar, After the 2 prior seasons of being on the team's bench, ready for each and every single opportunity, and after your toughest season to date, the numerous second place champ finishes, the LA Thieves could earn their first rings on top of the franchise claiming their first ever world championship. The number 4 seed, the London Royal Ravens. The London Royal Ravens headed into Vanguard with a bad taste in their mouth given how shaky of a year Cold War was. After suffering numerous roster changes, dealing with visa issues, and the community outrage of Scraps and Wiskin no longer being added onto the team, they were in need of a major reset. Alongside rookie standout Afro, London decided to bring back Zero, as well as 2 rookies who had been making waves in the EU Challenger scene, Gizmo and Nasty. Without a ton of knowledge on how well the team would play, we were introduced rapidly to the new era of the Royal Ravens. Despite statistically not having the greatest showing from the young guns, London managed to outlast EU's top dog, the Toronto Ultra, en route to finishing 3rd at Major 1. The result was impressive. Gizmo and Afro looked like one of the best duos in the league, and the inexperienced Ravens were favorites to play even better heading into Major 2. In the middle of that major, the Ravens started to spiral downwards. They were eliminated from Major 2 top 8, and heading into the Pro-Am, Gizmo was replaced by EU Challenger player Harry, a member of the Toronto EU team, as Gizmo had personal things to attend to. Despite still playing in Challengers, Gizmo watched as the Ravens continued to fall down the standings. Finishing last at the Pro-Am, winning just 2 matches throughout the entirety of Major 3, Harry was sent back to the bench, and Gizmo would finally return back to the team. Months had gone by since the 4 had played a series together. Many were worried if the team would be able to click again, given that some rumors had surfaced about some issues going on within the team. They were on the brink of what could have been a free fall through the standings, and to many surprise, they didn't skip a beat. It was as if the team clicked instantly once they played their first match, going 4-1 in the qualifiers and having the number 1 seed heading into the New York Major. Expectations were high as ever. London was back and looked to be a potential favorite. They'd seen struggles on land previously, but that was all behind them. Or at least they thought. The Ravens ran into EU rivals Toronto Ultra in round 1. Despite going up 2-0 in some very close games, they watched the series start to slip and lost the series in a game 5. The team waiting for them in the lower bracket, the LA Gorillas, were also trying to fight to stay in the top 8. They were also the only team that had managed to beat the 4-man lineup since they reunited. Despite another 2-1 advantage, the number 1 seed reunited Ravens were sent home packing top 12, another early tournament exit. Despite having one of the most talented young rosters in the league, the Ravens, after missing out on champs last year, are in much need of some redemption. They've seen their fair share of shortcomings on LAN, but the brightest stage and the first champs for 3 out of the 4 players still awaits. Will the spotlight be too big once again, or can the future of EU COD put on a show and finally translate that fire and swagger we've seen glimpses of all season? The number 5 seed, Seattle Surge. The Seattle Surge have been one of the more fascinating teams to follow throughout the Vanguard season, a franchise that for the prior 2 seasons have held players like Karma, Octane, Apathy, Gunless, Enable, Slacked, Looney, Pristini, etc., never managed to see any success and were labeled as the most disappointing franchise in the past 2 years. The Seattle Surge franchise made huge changes not only with their management but also with the team coming into Vanguard. Their star piece Octane ended up going to the LA Thieves, and they were left with a clean slate. The Surge added longtime veteran Accuracy, previously of the Minnesota Rocker, as well as Mac, a 2-year player who has spent his career solely on the New York Subliners. Seattle then decided to jump into the Challenger scene, picking up rookie and previous Atlanta FaZe substitute Sib, along with Aussie Challenger talent Pred. Questions immediately arose on the roster construction and full refresh that the Surge elected to make. Without a ton of footage on Pred and some Challenger VOD on Sib, the opening event, the Kickoff Classic, would be a perfect place to find out if this team was truly the real deal. And not only did the Seattle Surge look good, but they made it all the way to the finals. Expectations were sky high as the team looked excellent coming into Major 1. However, they would start to falter. Seattle went from a top 4 favorite to getting eliminated top 12 at Major 1, on top of giving the Paris Legion their first win of the year. Instantly, many called for a roster change, But despite the flack, the team remained desperate to showcase the talent that they know they had at Major 2. We finally started to see that fire again. Seattle looked incredible. They started off Major 1 with a 3-0 over the Major 1 champions Optic Texas. They were eager to take down the Atlanta FaZe when in the middle of map 1, Mac had to quit mid-series because of sickness.
We actually have been given an update. We're being told that Mac sick right now. Oh my. I've never seen this happen, Jay. Literally in the middle of the match, it might be.
He'd later come back and help rally Seattle to within 1 round of taking down the Atlanta FaZe. However, they would lose that series in a Game 5 Round 11 and later be eliminated by the LA Guerrillas, the future Major 2 champs. Seattle knew that if they were at full strength, they could have won the entire thing. They suffered another terrible setback at the Pro-Am, but remained focused for Major 3. Seattle would later go on to pull off one of the most clutch series in Call of Duty esports history, taking down the Atlanta FaZe in Winners Finals and later taking them down in the Grand Finals, giving Civ and Pred their first ever major championship. Seattle had finally proved not only to the COD world but to themselves that they deserved to be considered a top team and a contender. However, issues would strike again. Major 4 started off incredibly shaky, winning just 1 series in the qualifiers and later lost to Boston in their only series at Major 4. The defending champions went from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows, getting eliminated top 12 with shades of Major 1 written all over it. Seattle head into COD Champs 2022 with the accolade of being major champions, however, still with the stigma of remaining one of the most inconsistent teams in the league. While this is without a doubt the franchise's best season to date, the biggest worry is that this roster won't reach the consistent high potential everyone knows that they possess. Veteran accuracy will hope to lead the troops housed by 2 superstar rookie talents, Civ and Pred, at their first ever Call of Duty championship. Next up, the number 6 seed, Boston Breach. The newest franchise added to the Call of Duty League this season was the Boston Breach, a brand that instantly embraced COD culture and overnight became a team that fans at events cheer the loudest for. The Boston franchise made it clear that they were entering their first year of the CDL with high expectations. They signed on veterans Methods and TJ Halley and brought in 2 NA Challenger rookies, Capsule and Nero. The roster, said by many, wouldn't be able to stack up with the rest of the talent in the CDL, but little by little, Boston would start to sway those opinions. A top 6 finish at Major 1, followed up by a top 3 placement at Major 2, made it known that Breach were hungry to contend. Methods, longtime veteran and main AR, began to play his best Call of Duty in recent memory, helping light the way for the tactical young core. But, much like with many teams, inconsistency and poor results began to strike. A top 8 finish at the Pro-Am, along with a last place finish at Major 3, quickly alerted Boston that their quick come-up had started to go down. In one of the more delicate spots in the standings, their worry for missing out on champs continued to rise, and a roster change was made. Flashy rookie Capsule would be replaced by Vivid, coming from the Florida Mutineers. Many were critical of the move given the playstyle variations between the 2 players, but Boston once more proved that despite being in their first year, were far from making rookie mistakes. Vivid fit in like a glove. The pace of he and Nero made the Boston Breach turn from a slower, AR-dominant S&D team to a run-and-gun heavy-paced powerhouse. Despite having the most difficult schedule of any team coming into Major 4, Boston finished with an impressive 4-1 record and within days changed the tone of the narrative to a team on the rise again. While Boston put up a fight at Major 4, a top 8 finish is not where this team expects to be. Still adapting to their new playstyle will take time, but with champs coming just days from now, time is starting to run out. The Boston Breach roam into CDL Champs 2022 for their first time as an organization, eager to prove that once more, despite being the new kids on the block, they can continue to make noise and surprise, with possibly their biggest shock of the season still on the cards. The number 7 seed, Toronto Ultra. The Toronto Ultra fanbase have been on a ride throughout the Vanguard year. The Ultra 4 remained fully intact after an incredibly impressive Cold War season, without question the second best team all that year, just under the Atlanta FaZe. While Cold War was all about consistency, this year for Toronto has been all about composure. Toronto came into the season far behind the pack, slow to start scrimmages given that the players were visiting family in Europe. The lack of practice that Toronto had at the Kickoff Classic actually ended up leading into an early W. Quickly considered a top 2 team in the game, Toronto Ultra had high expectations for the rest of Vanguard as well as for Major 1. And despite a top 4 finish at Major 1, the only thing that many raved about was the fact that the Ultra had managed to pull off this incredible top 4 feat despite not winning a single hardpoint. That game mode losing streak would continue to haunt the Ultra, marching up until Major 2, where the stretch eventually reached winning 2 of their last 20 hardpoints. And before they knew it, their consistency of never finishing outside of the top 4 as a lineup was brutally ended by a last place finish at the Minnesota Major. Roster change rumors began to swirl, and with the Pro-Am coming up, it felt like it was the team's last chance to stick together. Given that the Pro-Am brought in 4 challenger teams, 2 of which were owned and operated by the Toronto Ultra franchise, it was recognized that a change was right around the corner. With young talent galore at the tournament, the Toronto 4 managed to finish the Pro-Am with a top 4 finish, placing just above the cut with their own major in a few weeks' time. Toronto carried that momentum and awareness into the Major 3 qualifiers with their best split record yet at 4-1. They were greeted at Major 3 by their own Toronto fan base, and to this group of EU players, it felt like home. They'd go on to make one of the best elimination bracket runs we've seen in recent memory, taking down 4 different rosters on their path to a top 3 finish. Expectations were at their highest for the team. It felt like with Insight and Cammy back in their elite form, the Cold War version of Toronto was finally back. However, within a few weeks' time, Ultra was back in the middle of the pack, losing crucial hardpoints and coming up short versus the elite teams. Despite what has been a year filled with highs and lows, one of the longest standing rosters we've seen in COD history may see champs as their last event together. With roster mania looming, pressure to perform is at its highest. But if we know anything about this Toronto team, it's to never count them out, especially when the stakes are at their highest. Finally, the number 8 seed, the New York Subliners. Without question, one of the best stories we've seen throughout COD history has been the New York Subliners' journey throughout Vanguard. Subtly put, it was a nightmare to kick off the season. With names like Crimsix and Clayster, it almost felt like they were a shoo-in to be a contender. But tragedy struck early. Major 1 ended with a top 12 finish and only 1 win to their name, along with a 13 straight hardpoint loss streak. Instantly, roster moves were made, internal drama continued to fill up social media feeds. It was truly an all-out disaster. Another top 12 finish at Major 2 made champs feel all but an afterthought. Moves were made. Recently added Paul X was joined by another challenger player, Kismet, known for his stint in 2019 with the Paris Legion. Questions were asked on if these players were the right additions for the team. Nobody really knew how the Subliners were going to play ahead of the Pro-Am, but the wins started to stack up. Close round 11 S&D victories combined with an all-out dominant respawn saw New York beating every single team in their path, as with the new additions, they would quickly take their first title of the year at the Pro-Am. While winning the Pro-Am was nice, no points were awarded for this LAN showcase, meaning that the Subliners still were set in the 11th seed, and it was time to showcase their improvement when it really mattered in the last half of the season. Major 3 awaited. In an opening match versus the Seattle Surge, down 0-2, New York managed to fight back and get the series to a Game 5. Up 5 rounds to 3, it looked like the series was theirs. Points were about to be awarded, but round by round, it started to slip away. And before they knew it, another heartbreaking defeat in a Game 5 round 11 led to another loss. Their chance to rise up the standings came crashing down once more, yet another top 12 finish at a major. The path was set. The task was known. It would have to be a miracle run in order for the Subliners to even get close to making top 8 and to get the champs. Pride was on the line. Players' reputations and a franchise's reputation were in the balance, as well as the perfect streak of making every COD champs for the greatest player of all time. A difficult schedule sat in front of them, but they managed to battle, beating Florida, beating the Gorillas, taking down Seattle, beating Optic Texas, and losing in a Game 5 to the LA Thieves. While they had made ground in the standings, it was still looking incredibly grim. The stars would have to align just right in order for them to move past the Mutineers, the Rocker, and the Gorillas. In a match that decided it all, their first one at Major 4, NYSL managed to fight back after a horrendous first 2 maps versus the Minnesota Rokkr. The reverse sweep was complete. Florida was up next, another impressive showing and dominance on display with a 3-0. It came down to one match. Every team in front of them was eliminated, and all they needed was one more W. That's all they needed in order to not just make the finals of their own major, but more specifically, to qualify for champs.
42-35, Kismet knows where they are. He knows where they are, Thieves. They've got to rush in. They've got to rush in, but it's Kismet again. It's Kismet again. New York, a city where dreams are made, and we just saw one. A miracle run. In these last few weeks has netted New York the 8th and final spot at champs and a grand final position here at their major.
History was made. With only 70 points to their name coming into Major 4, the 11th seed, down 50 points from even making it to the top 8, and with 0 major LAN wins coming into the final event, New York, in front of their home crowd, took down the LA Thieves and cemented their spot at champs. While it wouldn't be a major title added to the already amazing accolade, for the first time in months, the Subliner players, fans, and franchise could finally breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that the nightmare to start the season was finally over. But for New York, more specifically for the man that leads the team, Crimsix, making it to champs is great, but they're not just here to attend, they're here to contend. A miracle run to the top 8 after one of the worst starts from a team ever, to unexpected pieces making all the difference and leading to a champs trophy, would be one of the greatest stories in esports history. A first ring for Paul X, Hydra, and Kismet, on top of Crimsix claiming his 4th world championship, the most of any player. Not only that, but he'd also deliver a ring to every team he's ever played on: Complexity/EG, Optic Gaming, Dallas Empire, and the New York Subliners. That feat would without question cement his legacy even further as the greatest player Call of Duty Esports has ever seen. There you have it, your season recap as well as everything you need to know before watching COD Champs 2022. Whether you watch the whole season or if this is your first time watching in a while or ever, trust me when I say you do not want to miss this event. The Call of Duty Championship weekend takes place August 4th through the 7th live at the Galen Center in Los Angeles. I'll be sure to leave a link down in the description below to the Call of Duty League YouTube channel where you can feel free to watch all of the action taking place. Trust me when I say this video took a very long time to edit and record, so if you have not done so already, a like and a subscribe would mean a lot and go a very long way. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'll be sure to see you in the commentary booth for what should be a historical ending to one of the craziest years that we've seen in COD esports history. Take it easy, and I'll see you guys back here on the channel very soon.